Thank you very much for ushering us into your homes once again. My name is Edem Knight Tay, and this is 40 Weeks and More. Every woman who conceives desires to nurture that little life growing inside of them until they deliver safely. Along that journey, they would like to watch their babies go through all the developmental stages until they become well-rounded adults who will be living their destinies. But is that always the case? Is the journey always that smooth? Are the outcomes what we always expect? 40 Weeks and More is curated to shed light on some of the challenges women and families go through in their quest to birth and nurture lives. Remember also that this is our contribution to championing SDG 3 that seeks to reduce the global maternal mortality rate up to 70 in every 100,000 births by 2030. Welcome aboard. This is 40 Weeks and More. My name is Edem Knight Tay. On the show today, Hannah will be sharing her story with us, and she will tell us how painfully, after carrying baby for 40 weeks, baby ended up with cerebral palsy at some point in time. We will hear that story. But let me say a very big thank you to our sponsors, Ernest Chemist Limited, Shape Healthcare Specialist Medical Center, also to Labadi Beach Hotel, and to our supporters, Decozone, Our Luri, The Better Merchandise, and Lunch Avenue. Thank you all very much for banking on 40 Weeks and More. Now, meet my guest.
My name is Hannah Awadzi. I'm a mother of a child with cerebral palsy and an advocate for children with cerebral palsy. I am sharing my journey with my daughter on 40 Weeks and More.
I'm Dr. Abena Asantewaa Takyi, a pediatrician, senior specialist at Kolebu Teaching Hospital, Department of Child Health, and Shape Healthcare. Today, we're talking about neonatal jaundice on 40 Weeks and More.
Hannah, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much for
And Dr. Takyi, you're welcome as well.
Thank you.
Great. Hannah, how are you?
I'm doing well.
How's our girl?
She's fine.
How old is she now?
She's 11.
11.
Yes.
And for 11 years, she hasn't been able to walk?
No.
She hasn't said anything to you before?
She makes sounds.
But she hasn't called you mommy?
No, you won't hear mommy. You can hear like that's it.
How does that make you feel?
Well, for now, it doesn't make me feel sad. It doesn't make me feel sad because for now, I've come to accept that this is a condition and we are working to improve it. But initially, it was, I went through the cycle of grief, let me say, the denial that my daughter is not this, the prayers and everything to ensure that she gets well, till I got to a point where I realized that this is a condition and I can only manage to help her live a good life.
Tell me, what were your expectations when you got pregnant?
I always...
How long after marriage did you get pregnant?
Okay, so immediately after marriage, I wanted to have a baby. I mean, before marriage, I was praying that, oh God, when I get married, let me have a child. 4 months into my marriage, I realized I was pregnant, but I lost the pregnancy.
Oh, sorry about that.
I lost that at 12 weeks.
Wow.
And then after 1 year, I got pregnant again. Yes. So this time I was very careful.
Okay, let's go back a bit. Were you told reasons why you lost the earlier pregnancy?
The earlier pregnancy, when I had my very first scan, they said I had fibroids, which
could have been the reasons.
Yeah.
Okay. So a year on?
After a year of not being pregnant, then I got pregnant again. Yes.
What were your expectations this time around?
I was looking forward to having a child. I didn't care whether it would be a boy or a girl. All I wanted was to have a child.
And you mentioned that you were very careful. How careful?
Yes. So because I had lost an earlier pregnancy, this time I didn't want to even go through the pool, like go for antenatal and sit in the group. I got a doctor who I was consulting privately
Oh, wow.
to ensure that everything was okay. Made sure I took medications, the folic acid and everything.
You had your antenatals?
Yes.
You were regular with it?
Yes.
So usually at
regular.
antenatal, what's the routine?
So when you go, they will check your urine and all those things. Now I've forgotten 11 years ago. They will check your urine and something. And then doctor will check if the baby is okay. And then you go and continue with your folic acid. And
So it was just the regular
it was
antenatal routine?
Yes, regular antenatal
Did the
routine.
doctor suspect anything at any given point in time?
No.
No.
I didn't have any hint of, I call it the most unexpected situation I've ever had, because I didn't think that anything could go wrong.
Did you have any conditions hitherto getting pregnant?
No.
You didn't. You were fine?
Yes.
Great. And then we went into labor?
Yes.
Delivery?
Delivery was
it CS?
No.
Okay.
So I keep telling people that I have 3 children and it was my smoothest delivery. The other 2, I didn't have it that easy. But for her, it was very smooth. After delivery, she was all right. You know, they will check if baby was all right. So she was all right. The next day, I was discharged from the hospital.
And you were fine. You were strong. Baby
Yes.
was okay.
Yes.
Great.
Yes.
And you went home.
Yes. So we went home. It was on the 3rd day that I noticed that she had become yellow. She had turned yellow from top to her abdomen.
Okay.
Yes. So at that point, I pointed out to my husband that, hey, the baby is yellow. But we were first-time parents, and we didn't know whether it was anything to be concerned about or it was just part of the baby's development. I've heard that, when you give birth to babies, they change. So in my mind, baby was, yes. So my husband went to the office and told someone, an excited father, hey, the child was yellow this morning.
Oh my word.
Then the person said, hey, that is not something
a good thing.
So he called me that someone said this. I was in my in-law's house. So my mother-in-law said, well, let me call my sister, who is a nurse, and let's ask her what to do. And it was after she called that she said, oh, this is normal. Just take her to the early morning sun and it will be okay. So we were also there. This baby will startle sometimes.
This person who was contacted, sorry, was the person a medical officer?
No, a nurse.
A nurse.
A healthcare
okay, at least,
worker.
Yeah.
So we were also there. In the morning, we would take her out a little and come back indoors. But she wasn't sleeping. Everything about her changed. She wasn't sleeping. She was crying and all those things. We didn't know what really it was.
This was how many days after, as you started taking her out?
So we were home for 2 weeks. It was 2 weeks postnatal that I was told that the jaundice is severe and it's not something
Who
to
told
take.
you that?
I went when I was going postnatal to the hospital. So the nurses saw the baby and said, this baby is very jaundiced. The way they were saying it, I got scared. So that was when I decided to go see my doctor. And then my doctor said, no, you need to rush her to the pediatric unit because there could be a problem.
So you went to the pediatric?
Yes.
And then?
When I went, well, at that time, the doctors were not sure what kind of jaundice it was. So they said, oh, it's like greenish yellow. They were now discussing their medical terms. And we're not sure what to do. So we have to run tests. Nothing was done. They were just running, oh, let's get a catheter sample of her urine. Let's do that. What was sad for me was that there was not direct communication with me as a mother what was going on. So they just write tests for you. Go to this place, go and do this test, go do that. Till I got tired and decided, oh, let me just take care. We first tried another hospital, and then after some time, I said, let me just take care of this baby at home. And she got fine. I mean, when my baby was, when she was 3 months or 4 months old, you wouldn't say that there's anything wrong with this child. She seemed okay. till she
Was
got...
she now sleeping?
No, as for sleep, we had a lot of problems with sleep. She wasn't sleeping.
Was
but
she feeding?
She was feeding. She had grown plumpier. She could laugh. There was nothing you could physically see
that she had a problem.
It was occasionally when I'm carrying her around, someone will say, oh, your baby's neck is not stable. I didn't even know what that meant. So...
Hannah, let me pry a little bit. How old were you when you got pregnant?
I was matured. I was over 30.
Well,
I was over 30.
But you had not had any such experiences.
No, I had never heard of neonatal jaundice.
Like that.
And I didn't know that you could give birth to a child normal.
Oh, no.
And then something could happen
along the journey.
I didn't know.
Wow. So you talked about the fact that somebody would tell you that the baby's neck was not straight.
Yeah, the baby's neck is not stable. You know, for cerebral palsy, they can't control their movement. So she couldn't sit like this. When you put her down, her neck will slam back.
What was going through your head at the time?
At that time, nothing. I didn't think there was anything wrong with my child. She was 9 months. No, so I took her to school at 7 months. Career woman, I was going back to work. When I took her to school, 1 month, she used to be plumpy, but in 1 month she slimmed. Her weight dropped. And she was getting infections, you know, the nasal kind of sound. So we took her from school. And then I stayed home with her for a while. But I was actually going for my 9th month inoculation for her. Mm-hmm. And I saw another woman with a 9-month-old. And this woman's 9-month-old could stand. Like, they could let the girl stand and she would stand. But my daughter couldn't sit like this. She would slump in a chair. Oh. So at that point, that day when I came back from the hospital, I called my husband and I said, I saw a woman with a 9-month-old whose child is stable, like can stand, and our daughter is not sitting, so we should go back to the hospital. And that is when we realized that there was a problem.
And that was when they told you they diagnosed her with a cerebral palsy?
Yes, so, well, in between, from the day of birth, we had been going to hospitals, and we used to complain of the yellow. The yellow went by 3 months. But they will let us do what is called liver functioning test almost every visit. I got tired of it because nobody will tell you what was happening. And at a point, they said, the doctor said, I think it's okay or something. So, and I remember that when I was going for what we call the child welfare clinic, what we call weigh-ins to, I will ask the nurses, this baby does this, and then they'll say, every child is different. You know, so nothing made me think that there was a problem. But after the 9 months when we went, and then the doctor was even reluctant to say anything. You know what? One of the things with cerebral palsy is that your muscles get tensed. So it was difficult opening her hands like this. You know, when you are trying to open her hands, it's stiff. And when they were taking their blood samples, they will say, this baby is strong, because they are trying to pull the hand and it's not pulling. So those were all symptoms. It was after the 9 months that the doctor said, it could be suspected cerebral palsy. Maybe you should start physiotherapy.
You didn't know what that was?
I had met Farida Beje before I got married. But I didn't even know what condition she had. So when the doctor said that, we came back and Google was our rescue. I typed in cerebral palsy on Google. And the things I read, I just said, no, this is not my baby.
My daughter.
I think this is wrong. Like, I couldn't believe that this is it at the time.
But it progressed.
Yes, it did.
And eventually, what did they say caused it? The jaundice?
Yes, the likely cause was the jaundice. That's what they told me. That there's a substance in the body called bilirubin, which might have gone into the brain, the developing brain, to cause injury.
So when did you actually realize that my baby won't be able to function like every regular baby? When did you realize it, and when did you come to terms with it?
Okay, so after the diagnosis, I broke down. I
You
mean,
will.
I didn't know what to do. I didn't know what to do. I didn't know how it will end. So I was hopeful that, oh, maybe this girl will work, or what they are saying, maybe they don't know, and all those things, and let me pray and all those things. I did that for 2 years. She was 2 before I could accept that, okay, this is her condition.
Ruth, Doc.
Hello, Edem.
Anyway, if you're watching us, this is 40 weeks and more. My name is Edem Knight Tay. Today we're talking to Hannah. She has a baby who has cerebral palsy, and we are learning that this may have been caused by neonatal jaundice. Doc, I have questions for you. First of all, let's try to break these two things down: neonatal jaundice, cerebral palsy. And then my next question, let me ask it already. Why weren't doctors talking to the mother? I wanted to ask her, why weren't you asking questions? But it usually is not in our character to be asking questions. But why were the doctors not talking as well? Ahead of that, cerebral palsy, neonatal jaundice.
Thank you, Edem. And thanks so much, Hannah, for sharing your story with us. So I'll take the neonatal jaundice first. So when we say broadly and simply, so jaundice is the yellow discoloration of the skin and then the eyes, right? And it's an abnormal discoloration. That's when we call it jaundice. And then the neonate is a baby simply within the first 28 days of life. So very fresh newborn, let's say. So as Hannah rightly said, you will see jaundice, so it's a sign or a symptom if the mother can pick it. That comes as a result of the buildup of the bilirubin that she talked about in the blood. And the bilirubin, it's produced when we break down red blood cells.
Okay.
Are you still with me?
We shouldn't bother ourselves with it, right?
Oh, we should.
Okay, then please let us understand.
All right.
Because we want this conversation and this show to be devoid of medical jargons that we can't make meanings of.
The blood naturally has its own lifespan, right? The red blood cells in the blood. So when it's past its time, it will be broken down. And one of its breakdown products is the bilirubin. Okay, so think about it in this way. You can have too much bilirubin in the blood.
Okay.
Or you can have bilirubin that the body is not able to process correctly so that it can be removed. And for the newborn, because this is a now developing sort of human being, his body systems are not well developed. So if you have excess of this bilirubin, or the body is not able to process it correctly, the amount staying in the blood becomes more than the body can handle, and some of it can travel into the brain.
And that could cause...
And so the type of bilirubin that gets into the brain can damage it.
Wow.
Right. So the key thing is early detection.
Okay, early detection.
That's
Hold
the
it
key
there.
thing.
Let me ask you, could this have been detected somehow during pregnancy?
What I would say is that we know that there are certain risk factors for neonatal jaundice.
Okay.
Right. So that leads us sort of into the causes a little bit. Basically, we're looking for things that encourage the red blood cells to break. So some of the common ones are if there is, let's say, a mismatch, for lack of a better word, between the blood group of the mother and the blood group of the baby, right? So for instance, if the mother is blood group O and the baby is a different blood group B or A, there can be a little bit of a mismatch, and the red blood cells can break down a little bit faster than usual.
I see.
So that's one cause. Again, still with the blood groups, if the mother's blood group is a plus or a minus. So we generally say you are O positive or you are B negative, right? Those pluses and minuses are also types. So if the mother is a negative and her baby is a positive, that's also a mismatch. That can lead to increased breakdown of the red blood cells and then the bilirubin being produced. I can go on. So for instance, if the baby has more blood in general than, should we say, normal, we like things in a certain balance. So if you have more blood, then you can break down more, right? And when you break down more, you get more bilirubin.
Okay.
So that's another risk factor. And then on the other side, if the baby's, should I say, body system is not able to process that bilirubin into the form that can easily be removed, then you can also have a buildup. So again, there are some genetic things that you can be born with that make it difficult for the baby to process the bilirubin. Or again, if the liver, because the liver is a very important organ that's involved in processing this bilirubin. So if there are problems with the liver, then you can also have a buildup. Whatever it is, I mean, we can go on to talk about infections. So infections can also contribute to increase in the levels of the bilirubin. We have different types, but I won't go into that right now. So whatever it is, early detection, we pick up the jaundice and we start treatment with investigations.
Okay, I hear you, but you did directly answer my question. Now there's a lot of, technology and there are lots of interventions. That's how come I'm asking if it's possible that this could have been noticed somehow during her antenatals or, during the pregnancy.
So again, that's why I mentioned the issue of the risk factors.
Yes.
So I'm happy that Hannah talked about the tests that she did during pregnancy. There are certain tests that give us clues that when the baby is born, look out for jaundice.
Yes. Okay.
It won't say 100%, but it will tell you that there could be an increased risk. So the mother's blood group, is she G6PD deficient? This is something that we routinely test for in all pregnant women, because we know that if mother is G6PD deficient, the baby could also be G6PD deficient, and that can predispose the baby to developing jaundice.
So obviously this is a case of this issue not being detected early.
I think that's a big contributory factor.
That is what it is. Okay. Now, my other question I asked you, and I think I will come back to Hannah to also ask you. Let me ask Hannah first. Hannah, why weren't you asking questions?
I'm a troublesome patient, if you ask me. So I ask a lot of questions.
Okay.
When I go to the hospital, you easily notice me.
That
especially yes, especially if it's my daughter who is involved. But our healthcare system, it's not so friendly. Maybe they are overwhelmed with the number of patients because they don't really talk. And I have had occasions to recommend that doctors should be taught how to communicate with their patients. I don't like to use that. I want to call myself a client to a hospital. They should be taught how to communicate with clients when we come to them. You need the information to decide. But in our case, sometimes they probably brush you off and think that they can decide for you. And I think that was my case at that time.
Well, I had a similar case. I had a first child, and I mean, they said that the baby was jaundiced somehow, and so you were taking her to the sun and all that. Then I had a set of twins, and I mean, we were discharged. We went home. After a couple of days, we noticed that the child was becoming yellow, and when you touch the child like this, you will see it. And because I had a bit of knowledge, I was very upset. I carried my twins back to the hospital, looked for the pediatrician who was on duty. I won't mention his name, and we were discharged. And I confronted him. Then he said, some of you patients are too known. I told him my peace of mind. I think 3 days after, my children had to sleep under the photo for a couple of days, So when they were under the photo, I looked for him in the hospital and took him there to go and look at the babies. Then he says, oh, some of these things happen. It's nothing. It will clear. Yeah, sorry. So some people will talk. Some people will push. Others will just take it in. And in her case, she didn't push too much. And at the end of the day, you have an 11-year-old child who can't walk, who can't talk, and you lose the joy of carrying pregnancy for 40 weeks. Cerebral palsy. Doc, what is that?
All right. So maybe I'll come back to the communication issue.
Oh, no. Please answer it.
Okay.
Good you reminded me.
Because I realized that question came in. There were 3 questions and we only dealt with the neonatal jaundice. So, I mean, I totally can empathize with Hannah and yourself. Sometimes the experience in the healthcare system isn't the best. It could always be better. And communication is key at every stage. I mean, she did mention it. There are so many reasons why it may or may not happen, but it should be our goal to communicate what's happening to the mother, to the parents, so that they can walk with us, right? So you're not wrong in sort of demanding and asking for feedback and communication, and we encourage our patients to do so. But like you said, it's not everybody who has the capacity to. Just looking at the two, I think your scenario as well, and that's, I think, the key point of us having this discussion. I can examine your baby in the morning and there may not be jaundice. Clinically evident. And I said clinically evident because it's for my eyes to see. By evening, that can change. Right? And this information has to sink in, you know, even from before pregnancy, from secondary school, from as long as you're educated, you know, because we're all in this together. Mother may not pick it, grandma may pick it, auntie may pick it, nanny may pick it. What we say, and if there's anything I want us to go away with and our listeners, is that jaundice that you notice, first and foremost, within the first 24 hours of life is pathological. That is problematic until proven otherwise. That's the first thing.
Okay.
So I can examine baby at birth, which we're all excited. A pediatrician is here, has seen my baby. I turn around 12 hours, maybe still be fine. 16 hours, may still be fine. 18 hours, 20 hours, you start noticing some yellow. You need to ring those bells. The alarm bells need to begin to go off.
Doc, so it's wrong from what you're saying. People go to the hospital in the morning, they deliver at 6 a.m. By 10 a.m., they're asking you to go home.
So this is such a large discussion. I'm not sure I want to veer into that.
That you can say is wrong from what you're saying.
There are pros and cons of that. That's why I'm saying it's important for the education to go out. Because let's say you've had a vaginal delivery. Mother is fit. Baby is fit. Well, in quotes. But does mother know that, hey, keep a lookout for that jaundice developing later, especially if there are risk factors? Like you said, they discharged you day 1 or day 2 or so, but day 3 or so, you noticed the jaundice, you came back. It's possible even it started earlier than day 3, but sometimes you need an experienced eye to pick it when it's at lower levels. She rightly said it was down to the abdomen. We know that when it begins, it starts from the head and it spreads downwards. It may have actually been beyond that, but you need a certain level of experience to pick that, I would say. But even with an experienced eye, it is not the same as a test being done. So the watchword is, if you notice jaundice, especially within the first 24 hours, it doesn't matter what you're doing, present back at the hospital and ask for a test to be done. If you notice it later, 2-3 days, it is possible that it is the less dangerous type. But you cannot tell that just by looking at the baby. So still go back.
Great.
And let's have that test done. If you go to the first institution and they say, go back home, go to the next. Keep pushing till you get the answer that you want. But the communication, 100%, you have a right to it.
Okay. Now let me ask you again. So if it is detected early enough, what are the interventions? What could have been done? In my case, like I mentioned, they went under the photo for a number of days and then they ran some tests and then they said they were fine. So I could carry my bundles of joy home. But what are the, apart from photo, I heard about a case which is exchange blood transfusion and all that. What are the interventions?
So you're right. For the majority of patients, once you start phototherapy, you're good to go. most of the babies, the jaundice levels or the bilirubin levels will come down nicely. You may have some instances where it will come down and actually you stop and then it goes back up. And then you have to put them back under the phototherapy. So monitoring is key, whether you are at home or you are in hospital in that first 2 weeks of life. Exchange transfusion, we reserve for those cases where the level of the bilirubin is so high that it is posing, significant risk to that baby, because it's we would say it's an invasive procedure. Phototherapy, baby is lying in his little bassinet receiving his light.
Their eyes covered.
Eyes very importantly covered and so forth. But with exchange transfusion,
they look so miserable in there.
I know. And they don't really like it. They cry a lot when they're
I know. I still remember 16 years ago, but I still remember
they don't like it. But I always encourage the mothers, let the baby lie in it. That's the medicine. Please don't keep taking the baby out because it affects the effectiveness of the treatment. You want that contact between the blue light and the baby's skin, to draw out the bilirubin from his blood. So the exchange transfusion, really, we reserve it for those who have very high levels or there's evidence that, damage is actually beginning.
Could you simply break that down for in a minute, the exchange transfusion?
Okay. So what happens is we need to look for blood that will be, should I say, compatible with the baby at this point. And the process is we draw out the baby's own blood systematically. So it's not all at once. We are not draining out all the baby's blood, but we draw out the blood and then we push in the donor's blood. And we do that till we've taken out a significant amount, enough to drop that bilirubin level. So you need to check the bilirubin before, you check afterwards, you continue to monitor, you keep them under phototherapy, keep checking until you have a sustained decline. And even with the exchange transfusion, depending on the underlying cause, you can have some babies that need a repeat transfusion. So, as I said from the beginning, you notice jaundice, in fact, whenever you notice jaundice, make sure that a test has been done and something has been started. Remember that it's not every level of jaundice that requires phototherapy. That's the flip side. But I don't want that to get into people's heads too much, which is why monitoring is important. And then when you talked about intervention, maybe this isn't quite an intervention, but it's almost like it helps the whole process. So breastfeeding or feeding the baby is very important because it helps the baby itself, the body itself, to get rid of this bilirubin, all right? And it does that through the gut. So feeding, keeping the baby well hydrated is also important for that process.
Great. This is 40 weeks and more. On this particular edition, we're talking about neonatal jaundice and how it can lead to other serious or other severe conditions. Like in Hannah's case, her baby ended up with cerebral palsy. If you have been watching us, then you will know that she went through, a lot. And like Doc is saying, early detection is key. I think my takeout from this show will be, do not let anybody push you away without you getting the results or getting the answers you require. Because at the end of the day, in her case, she is the one who is stuck with a baby who is unwell. Maybe out of a miracle, she could get well. Otherwise, medically, the child is, is paralyzed, let me just say. We'll take a break and we will be right back. Thank you very much for staying with us. This is 40 Weeks and More. My name is Edem Knight Tay, and let me say a very big thank you to our sponsors, Ernest Chemists Limited, also to Ship Healthcare Specialist Medical Center, to Labadi Beach Hotel, and to our supporters, Deco Zone, Doberta Merchandise, R. Lurie, and Lunch Avenue. Thank you all very much for supporting 40 Weeks and More, where lives are nurtured. On this particular show, we have been talking about neonatal jaundice, cerebral palsy. Hannah, I'll come back to you shortly, right? My guest, Hannah, she's sharing her story with us. And then Dr. Takyi is a pediatrician. Hannah, I'll come back to you, right? But let me go back to Doc. Let's talk about cerebral palsy. What is it? And can a child be healed from it? I wish I could hear some very hopeful words from you.
I wish I could say yes.
Oh dear.
All right, so broadly and simply again, cerebral palsy is like a big term or an umbrella term for a group of disorders that have to do with the body's movement, so motion, right? Or yes, motion, function, coordination. And the underlying cause tends to be any form of injury to the brain when it's in its developing stage.
Stages.
So that could be where from in the womb to the early neonatal period, right through some authorities will even go up to about 3 years. Okay, so there's some insult along the way. And there are a variety of causes, acquired and sort of things that you are born with, should I say, genetics.
Okay.
So some can be prevented and some may not be. And unfortunately, severe neonatal jaundice is one of them.
And once you have it or you've been diagnosed of cerebral palsy, that's it?
I would say
Sadly.
you can't be cured, but it can be managed.
To what extent will the managing make you live a better life? Hannah, why are you laughing?
It can be cured, but can be managed. It sounds like a cliche for me because they always tell you those things. Then you know that nothing really.
Because the management doesn't do anything.
Yeah. There are a lot of literature on even what we do, the physiotherapy and all those things. So it's a whole lot. It's a whole lot.
Doc, share with us some of the ways that this is managed.
All right, so
managed with.
So it's
no. Let me finish. Managed to the extent that the child can live a better life.
I think that's the goal always.
Yeah,
that's the goal. We may not achieve it 100%, but you would try, isn't it? And as far as we know, so she talked about it. They tend to be sort of a bit stiffer, a bit rigid. So physiotherapy can help. Sometimes certain medications are available, and it depends on where you are also in this world, isn't it? Certain medications are available. We have occupational therapists who help to improve the functioning of the child based on whatever limitations the child has. They work with the child to see how can we improve how this child can function in a day-to-day life. There's a speech therapist who can help in terms of how their communication. We're looking at even feeding problems. That's something that is, we tend to overlook feeding problems, but if you can't coordinate properly to even swallow, you can imagine how will you grow well and so forth. So speech therapist comes in, you may need a dietitian. And then, of course, the pediatrician, if you have a neurologist available, if there are other associated problems. So remember when I said the description for cerebral palsy, I talked about a movement disorder, but we know that there are other challenges that tends to come with it. And Hannah rightly mentioned the issue of seizures. So some of the children have epilepsy, so they need to be on medication for that. And a proportion will also have learning difficulties as well. Some have hearing problems. So yeah, she's laughing, but the list can go on. So it's multidisciplinary. It's a lot of work. I mean, she said she's a working woman. requires so much social support. And some do get results. Remember, every child is different.
Yeah.
In our society, of course, the social setup isn't always helpful. But when the child is fortunate to get everything they need, you can maximize their abilities.
Great.
And some of them have normal cognitive function. But just because you observe, the differences in their movement, and the assumption is made that maybe the child
Right.
is, intellectually challenged, but it's not always the case.
Hannah, let me come to you and we'll wrap up with you. So how have you been managing? How have you been managing?
Okay. So I'll say that managing a child with cerebral palsy is very difficult.
I can imagine.
Very, very, very difficult in Ghana because we do not have the support systems anywhere. So you have to start from scratch. I'll start with the health service, even going to the hospitals. I remember one point I decided to take my child to see a neurologist in a government hospital. I live at Oyibi. You have to leave the house like 3 a.m. with a child who is not sleeping in the night and go and queue and wait for the doctor to come at 9 or 10. By the time you get there at 4 a.m., you are number 10. It's so difficult. So no kind of support for you. And when you have this child, they say, oh, apart from seeing the neurologist, you have to see speech therapist, physiotherapist, occupational therapist.
Everybody's charging differently.
I'm not even coming to the charges here.
Side.
At least once a week.
Wow. All of them.
How do you work? I always ask people, so how do I maintain work and take care of the child? Because when I go to the hospital, it's not free. As the child grows, you may not even be able to use public transport with this child. So anytime you are moving, you need either an Uber or a taxi, or you should be driving. So you have to go, maybe Monday you go for physio, Tuesday, like your life comes around the child. That doesn't end there. We don't have schools for any child with cerebral palsy in Ghana. And I always say this, my child luckily has her cognition very intact.
Okay.
But how do they educate her has been the problem. So if you attempt taking her to school, they'll say, oh, you can't take her. In fact, in the first place, if I want her to go to school, I need her to go with a caregiver. You pay the caregiver, the school charges you higher.
For even coming with a caregiver.
Yeah.
Oh.
And yet they don't even have the forms. They can't teach the child. So your child is just going there.
Just so you can have some relief, maybe.
Yeah. So there are no schools. We beg for schools to take our children. No social life because we don't have ramps or whatever. My daughter is 11 now. I can't carry her.
Oh.
So I have to use a wheelchair or something. But I can't take her to the market, for instance. How am I going to carry her in a wheelchair
to the market?
There, it's not friendly. You can't use a wheelchair there. So it's a whole lot of challenge that we haven't thought of as a country. These children exist, will continue to exist, and yet we don't think of them. We don't put in place any support systems. So once you have them, you are eliminated from society, you are isolated, you can't be part of anything. And yet, a lot of people also exploit these parents because their challenges are visible. So pastors will be telling you this, sometimes tests you are not supposed to do in the hospital.
You'll ask you to do it.
A whole lot of things. It's a lot financially, and our society is not helping us.
Hannah, I'd like to say a very big thank you to you for coming out to share. A lot of parents would rather keep the children in the room and not want anybody to know that these are the challenges they are going through. So for the advocacy work you're doing, all the things you're pushing around to ensure that these children have some form of relief and have a better life. God bless you so much.
Amen.
Doc, let's have your final words.
Thank you, Edem. So what I'll say is for neonatal jaundice, early detection is key. In the first 24 hours of life, take your baby into good light, have a good look at the baby from head to toe, and keep doing that every day in the first 2 weeks of life at least. And if you see any sign of jaundice, please report to a health facility where the baby can be tested and appropriate treatment can be started if need be. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Doc. And if I should add anything, the doctors should also be very receptive and talk to us.
Yes, you're right.
Yeah, and this is where we are wrapping up on today's show, 40 Weeks and More. Once again, thank you to all our sponsors, Ernest Chemist Limited, to Shape Healthcare Specialist Medical Center, to Labadi Beach Hotel, Decozone, The Better Merchandise, Aruluri, and Lunch Avenue. You all have made this possible, and we are grateful. My name is Edem Knight Tay. Yeah, I know, I dipped a little bit because I am sad, but next week we will come your way with another edition of 40 Weeks and More. Do have a great week. Bye.